I felt his fingers trace along my skin, slow and deliberate, as the city lights of Vegas sparkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his suite. My husband was 3 floors below, probably still nursing his whiskey at the bar, completely unaware that his most important client had just asked me to stay. The silk dress I'd worn to dinner clung to my curves as Grayson stepped closer, his presence filling the space between us. "You know this changes everything," he murmured, his breath warm against my neck. I should have walked away. I should have said no. But when his hands found my waist, all I could think about was how long it had been since someone looked at me like that, like I was the only thing that mattered in the room. Hey, if you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button and subscribe. I promise it's about to get even more intense, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The evening had started innocently enough. My husband Mark had asked me to join him for dinner with Grayson Wells, a potential investor whose backing could transform Mark's startup. "Just be charming," he'd said, straightening his tie in our hotel mirror. "This deal could change our lives." I'd chosen the black silk dress carefully, elegant but not too revealing, professional yet feminine, the kind of outfit that commanded respect while still catching attention. Grayson was waiting in the hotel's rooftop restaurant when we arrived, and I understood immediately why Mark was so eager to impress him. Tall, confident, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that seemed to see right through you. He rose as we approached, his handshake lingering just a moment too long as his gaze swept over me. "You must be Ava," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "Mark didn't mention how stunning you are." Mark laughed nervously, but I caught the way his jaw tightened slightly. Throughout dinner, I played my part perfectly, asking thoughtful questions about Grayson's investment philosophy, sharing stories about my event planning business, keeping the conversation flowing. But beneath the professional veneer, I felt something else building. The way Grayson's eyes found mine across the table, how his fingers brushed against mine when he reached for the wine bottle, the electric tension that crackled between us every time Mark excused himself to take a call. "Your wife is remarkable," Grayson told Mark during one of those absences, but his gaze never left my face. "Intelligent, accomplished, beautiful. You're a lucky man." Heat flooded my cheeks, and I took a sip of wine to steady myself. This was dangerous territory, the kind of flirtation that could derail everything Mark had worked for. But I couldn't deny the thrill that shot through me at his words. As the evening wore on, Mark grew increasingly animated, discussing projections and market strategies with the fervor of someone who saw his dreams within reach. Grayson listened attentively, asking all the right questions, but I noticed how his attention kept drifting back to me. When dessert arrived, he leaned back in, his chair studying us both with an unreadable expression. "Mark, this has been enlightening," he said finally. "I'd like to continue our discussion, but I have an early flight tomorrow. Perhaps we could reconvene in my suite? I have some documents I'd like to review with you." Mark's face lit up. This was exactly the kind of private meeting that sealed deals. But then Grayson's gaze shifted to me. "Ava, I'd love to get your perspective as well. Your background in event management could provide valuable insights for the marketing strategy we discussed." I felt Mark's hand squeeze mine under the table, a silent plea. This was his moment, his chance to secure the future we'd both dreamed of. How could I say no? "Of course," I heard myself agreeing, even as something deep in my stomach warned me that nothing about this invitation was purely professional. Grayson's suite occupied the entire top floor of the hotel, with panoramic views of the Las Vegas Strip stretching out below us like a glittering jewel. The space was elegantly appointed, plush leather furniture, a marble wet bar, floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city feel close enough to touch. He poured drinks while Mark spread his presentation materials across the coffee table, but I found myself drawn to the windows, mesmerized by the neon pulse of the city below. "Quite a view," Grayson said, appearing beside me with a glass of champagne. His shoulder brushed against mine as he handed it to me, and I felt that familiar spark of electricity. Mark was already deep in his pitch, pointing to charts and graphs, with the intensity of someone fighting for his life's work. Grayson listened politely, but I could feel his attention divided, his presence a constant warm weight beside me. "The numbers are solid," Grayson said after Mark finished his presentation, "but I need to understand the human element better, the passion behind the project." His eyes found mine. "Ava, what drew you to event planning? What drives you to create experiences for people?" The question caught me off guard with its intimacy. I found myself talking about the thrill of bringing people together, of crafting moments that would linger in memory long after the last guest had gone home. Grayson listened with an intensity that made my skin warm, asking follow-up questions that showed he was truly hearing me, not just making conversation. Mark began to fidget, checking his phone repeatedly. "I should call the babysitter," he said, finally. "Check on the kids." He stepped onto the balcony, his voice fading as he dialed. Suddenly, the vast suite felt much smaller, the space between Grayson and me charged with possibility. "You're wasted in that marriage," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they gave voice to thoughts I'd been trying to suppress for months. Mark was a good man, a devoted father, but somewhere along the way, we'd become more like business, partners than lovers. When was the last time he'd looked at me the way Grayson was looking at me now? "You don't know anything about my marriage," I replied, but my voice lacked conviction. Grayson stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and intoxicating that made my head spin. "I know that a woman like you should be cherished," he said, his hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from my face. "Worshipped, made to feel like the goddess you are." His thumb traced along my cheekbone, and I felt my breath catch. This was wrong, so wrong, but I couldn't seem to step away. The warmth of his touch, the intensity in his eyes, it had been so long since anyone had made me feel truly seen, truly desired. Through the window, I could see Mark pacing on the balcony, gesturing animatedly into his phone. He was probably smoothing over some minor crisis at home, playing the dutiful husband and father while I stood here drowning in the attention of another man. Guilt and desire warred in my chest, but when Grayson's hand slid down to cut my jaw, desire won. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his lips barely an inch from mine. "Tell me this is wrong and I'll back away right now. We'll pretend this conversation never happened, and I'll write your husband his check tomorrow morning." But I couldn't form the words. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, my body making a choice my mind wasn't ready to acknowledge. Tai kiss was electric, sending shockwaves through my entire body. His lips were firm and warm, moving against mine with a confidence that made my knees weak. I melted into him, my hands fisting in his shirt as years of neglected passion came roaring to life. He tasted like whiskey and possibility, like everything I'd been missing without even knowing it. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, I could see Mark through the window, still lost in his phone call. "He doesn't see you," Grayson murmured, against my ear, his words sending shivers down my spine. "Not the way I do, not the way you deserve to be seen." His hands settled on my waist, pulling me closer until I could feel the heat of his body through the thin silk of my dress. "This is insane," I whispered, but even as I said it, I was pressing closer, craving more of his touch. "If Mark finds out—" "Mark won't find out," Grayson assured me, his lips finding the sensitive spot just below my ear. "This stays between us. Just tonight, just this moment." His hands were moving now, sliding along my sides, mapping the curves of my body through the silk. Every touch sent fire racing through my veins, awakening nerve endings I'd forgotten existed. I knew I should stop this. I knew I should push him away, return to my husband's side, pretend this moment had never happened. But when Grayson's fingers found the zipper at the back of my dress, when he began to lower it with agonizing slowness, I was lost. The cool air of the suite kissed my newly exposed skin, and I shivered, not from cold, but from the intensity of his gaze as he took in every inch of me. "Beautiful," he breathed, his hands skimming over my bare shoulders, leaving trails of fire in their wake. "Absolutely beautiful." He guided me backward until my legs hit the edge of the plush sofa, his eyes never leaving mine. "Are you sure about this?" I should have said no. I should have grabbed my dress and run. Instead, I reached for his shirt, my fingers working at the buttons with trembling hands. "I've never been more sure of anything," I whispered, and meant it. This might be wrong, might be a betrayal of everything I'd promised to be, but in this moment, it felt like the most honest thing I'd done in years. Grayson's shirt fell away, revealing a chest that spoke of regular workouts and careful attention to his body. My hands explored the expanse of warm skin, marveling at the contrast between his polished exterior and the raw masculinity beneath. He groaned softly at my touch, his own hands growing bolder, more demanding. The dress pulled at my feet, leaving me in nothing but the lace undergarments I'd chosen more for myself than for Mark's benefit. Grayson's eyes darkened as he took me in, his gaze both reverent and hungry. "You're perfect," he said, his voice rough with desire. "Absolutely perfect." He lifted me easily, settling me on the sofa with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the urgency building between us. His lips found mine again, deeper this time, more demanding. I could taste the desperation in his kiss, the same need that was clawing at my chest. This wasn't just physical attraction, it was recognition, a meeting of souls that had been searching for each other without knowing it. His mouth traced a path down my throat, finding the hollow at the base where my pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. Every kiss, every gentle nip of his teeth sent waves of sensation crashing through me. I arched beneath him, my body responding to his touch in ways I'd almost forgotten were possible. His hands were everywhere, tracing the curve of my waist, skimming along my thighs, leaving me breathless and wanting more. Through the haze of desire, I was dimly aware of Mark's voice still carrying from the balcony, discussing pickup times and bedtime routines with the babysitter. The juxtaposition was jarring, my husband managing the mundane details of our life, while I discovered new dimensions of pleasure just yards away. Guilt flickered through me, but it was quickly consumed by the fire Grayson was building in my blood. His fingers found the clasp of my bra, and I held my breath as he released it, the lace falling away to expose me completely to his gaze. "Gorgeous," he murmured, his hands cupping me reverently before his mouth followed. The sensation of his lips on my skin was overwhelming, waves of heat and pleasure cascading through my body until I could barely think, barely breathe. I was lost in a world of sensation, the warmth of his mouth, the gentleness of his hands, the way he seemed to know exactly how to touch me, to make me come undone. Every caress was deliberate, purposeful, designed to bring me maximum pleasure. This wasn't the hurried, perfunctory intimacy that had become the norm in my marriage. This was worship, adoration, the kind of focused attention that made me feel like the center of the universe. My hands tangled in his hair as he continued his exploration, my body arching toward him, instinctively seeking more contact, more sensation. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, but they seemed to fade into insignificance compared to the fireworks exploding beneath my skin. I was dimly aware that I was making sounds, soft gasps and moans that seemed to echo in the luxurious space, but I was beyond caring about propriety or discretion. Grayson's touch grew more insistent, more demanding, and I felt myself spiraling toward something magnificent and terrifying. The tension built within me, coiling tighter and tighter until I thought I might shatter from the intensity. And then, just as I teetered on the edge of release, I heard the sliding door to the balcony open. "Sorry about that," Mark's voice carried across the suite. "Crisis at home, you know how it is." I froze, panic flooding my system as reality crashed back over me. Grayson moved with lightning speed, pulling a throw blanket over me as he stood, somehow managing to make it look like he'd simply been showing me the view from the windows. "No problem at all," Grayson replied smoothly, his voice betraying none of the passion that had filled it moments before. Ava was just admiring the city lights, quite spectacular from up here. He moved to the bar, pouring himself a drink with steady hands while I struggled to control my breathing, to make sense of what had just happened. Mark appeared in the living area. His tie loosened, looking every inch the harried businessman. "Everything okay here?" he asked, glancing between Grayson and me. I managed a smile, hoping it looked more natural than it felt. "Just taking in the view," I said, my voice only slightly breathless. "It really is incredible up here." Mark nodded absently, already turning his attention back to his presentation materials. The moment felt surreal, my husband discussing investment strategies while my body still hummed with unfulfilled desire, while Grayson's taste still lingered on my lips. "I should probably get Ava back to our room," Mark said, checking his watch. "Early flight tomorrow, and she's had a long day." Grayson nodded understandingly, but I caught the flash of disappointment in his eyes, the same ache I felt in my chest. "Of course," he said graciously. "Thank you both for a lovely evening. I'll have my assistant contact you about the next steps, Mark." He walked us to the door, his hand briefly touching my lower back as he said goodbye. A touch so light Mark wouldn't notice, but one that sent electricity racing through my system all the same. In the elevator, Mark was practically vibrating with excitement. "Did you see how he responded to the Q4 projections? I think we really impressed him. This could be it, Ava. This could be everything we've been working toward." I nodded and made the appropriate sounds, but my mind was still in that suite, still feeling Grayson's hands on my skin, still tasting his kiss on my lips. Back in our room, Mark was too wired to sleep, pacing and making notes about follow-up strategies. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to collect myself, to process what had happened. In the mirror, I looked like a woman who'd been thoroughly kissed, my lips slightly swollen, my eyes bright with residual desire. I splashed cool water on my face, trying to wash away the evidence of my betrayal, but I could still feel Grayson's touch like a brand on my skin. When I emerged, Mark was finally settling into bed, his excitement giving way to exhaustion. He reached for me automatically, his touch familiar but somehow different now, lighter, less purposeful than Grayson's had been. "Thank you for tonight," he murmured against my hair. "For being perfect, for helping me seal this deal. I love you." The words hit me like a physical blow. Here was my husband, thanking me for my faithfulness while I'd spent the evening in another man's arms. The guilt was overwhelming, but beneath it lurked something else, a hunger that hadn't been satisfied, a need that hadn't been met. As Mark drifted off to sleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my body still aching with unfulfilled desire. Sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grayson's face, felt his hands on my skin, heard his voice whispering that I deserved to be worshipped. The rational part of my mind knew this was dangerous, knew that pursuing whatever had started between us could destroy everything Mark and I had built together. But the woman in me, the woman who'd been neglected, taken for granted, reduced to a supporting role in her own life, craved more of what Grayson had offered. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Can't sleep either? G. My heart raced as I stared at the message, knowing I should delete it, should pretend I'd never seen it. Instead, I found myself typing back, "No, can't stop thinking." His response came immediately. "Same. You're haunting me." The words sent a thrill through me that I tried desperately to suppress. This was madness. I was lying next to my sleeping husband, texting with another man about thoughts that could destroy my marriage. But I couldn't seem to stop myself. "This is crazy," I typed back. "Crazy doesn't begin to cover it," came his reply. "But I can't forget how you felt in my arms, how you tasted, how you responded to my touch." Heat flooded my body at his words, and I had to bite back a moan. Mark shifted beside me, and I held my breath, terrified he would wake up and see the evidence of my betrayal glowing on my phone screen. "We can't," I typed, though the words felt hollow even as I sent them. "Can't we? You felt it too. That connection, that chemistry. When was the last time someone touched you like you were precious, like you were the only woman in the world?" His words cut straight to the heart of my loneliness, my neglect, my desperate need to feel desired. I stared at the phone for long minutes, knowing that my next response would determine everything. I could end this now, delete his number, pretend this had never happened. Or I could take the leap into something dangerous and exhilarating and potentially devastating. "Room 1247, I typed before I could lose my nerve. "Give me 10 minutes. The wait felt eternal. I slipped from bed with practiced silence, grabbing a hotel robe and padding barefoot to the door. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure it would wake Mark, but he remained dead to the world, exhausted from his evening of networking. The hallway was empty, dimly lit, and I felt like a ghost haunting the corridors of my own life. The soft knock came exactly 10 minutes later. I opened the door to find Grayson, still dressed but disheveled, his eyes dark with the same need I felt consuming me. We stared at each other for a heartbeat, the weight of what we were about to do hanging between us like a physical presence. "Last chance," he said quietly. "We can still walk away from this. Pretend it never happened." But even as he spoke, he was stepping into the room, his hands already reaching for me. I closed the door behind him, the soft click of the lock sealing our fate. "I don't want to walk away," I whispered, and then his mouth was on mine, fierce and demanding, months of frustrated desire exploding between us. He lifted me easily, carrying me to the sitting area away from the bedroom where Mark slept, his lips never leaving mine. This time there was no hesitation, no stopping. His hands worked the belt of my robe with urgent efficiency, the silk falling away to reveal my naked body beneath. He groaned at the sight, his eyes drinking in every curve, every line, as if he was memorizing me. "You're incredible," he breathed, his hands skimming over my skin with reverent touches that made me shiver. I reached for his shirt, desperate to feel skin against skin, to erase the barrier between us. He helped me, shrugging out of his clothes with an efficiency that spoke of barely leashed control. When he was finally naked before me, I took a moment to appreciate the masculine beauty of his body. Lean muscle, broad shoulders, the evidence of his desire for me impossible to ignore. He lowered me to the plush chair, his body covering mine, as his mouth found my throat, my collarbone, the sensitive hollow between my breasts. Every kiss was worship, every touch designed to bring me pleasure. His hands explored my body with a thoroughness that left me gasping, finding sensitive spots I'd forgotten existed, creating new ones with his skilled touch. When his fingers finally found the heart of my desire, I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out. He was gentle but insistent, building the tension within me with patient skill. "Let go," he whispered against my ear. "Let me take care of you. Let me give you what you need." His words were as potent as his touch, permission to abandon the control I'd maintained for so long, to simply feel and accept and take. The climax built slowly, then crashed over me with devastating intensity. I buried my face against his shoulder to muffle my cries, my body shaking with the force of release. He held me through it, whispering endearments, his hands soothing even as they continued to stoke the fire within me. But he wasn't finished with me. As the aftershocks faded, he repositioned us, his mouth replacing his hands, and I nearly sobbed from the intensity of sensation. This was beyond anything I'd ever experienced, not just the physical pleasure, though that was overwhelming, but the emotional connection, the sense that he truly saw me, truly wanted to give me everything I'd been missing. When he finally rose above me, positioned himself at my entrance, we both paused, recognizing the significance of the moment. This would change everything. Cross a line we could never uncross. His eyes searched mine, looking for any sign of doubt, any hesitation. "I need you," I whispered, the admission torn from my soul. "I need this. I need you." He entered me slowly, carefully, his eyes never leaving mine as our bodies joined. The sensation was indescribable, not just physical pleasure, though that was exquisite, but a sense of completion, of finding something I hadn't even known I was missing. We moved together with a rhythm that felt both new and ancient, our bodies, communicating in ways that transcended words. He was gentle, yet passionate, tender, yet demanding, giving me exactly what I needed in every moment. The connection between us was electric, every touch sending shockwaves through my system, every kiss deepening the bond being forged between us. Time became meaningless. There was only sensation, only the dance of bodies and souls finding each other in the darkness. When the final wave of pleasure crashed over us both, we collapsed together, breathing hard, hearts racing in sync. In the aftermath, as we lay entwined on the chair, reality began to seep back in. What had I done? I was a married woman, a mother, and I'd just committed the ultimate betrayal with my husband sleeping mere yards away. The guilt was crushing, but beneath it burned something else, a fierce joy, a sense of awakening that I couldn't entirely regret. "I should go," Grayson said finally, though he made no move to release me. "Before he wakes up." I nodded, knowing he was right, but unwilling to break the spell that surrounded us. This stolen moment felt too precious to end, too perfect to relegate to memory. "Will I see you again?" I asked, hating how vulnerable the question made me sound. He tilted my chin up, his eyes serious as they met mine. "Do you want to?" The question hung between us, loaded with possibility and danger. I thought of Mark, of our children, of the life we'd built together. Then I thought of how Grayson made me feel, alive, desired, cherished in ways I'd forgotten were possible. "Yes," I whispered, sealing my fate. "God help me, yes." He dressed quickly, pausing to kiss me one last time before slipping from the room like a ghost. I sat alone in the chair where we'd made love, my body still humming with satisfaction, my mind reeling with the implications of what we'd done. In a few hours, Mark would wake up, excited about his potential deal, unknowing that his wife had just embarked on an affair that could destroy everything. The next morning arrived with brutal clarity. Mark was indeed excited, chattering about follow-up meetings and projected timelines as we packed our bags. I went through the motions of being a supportive wife, but my thoughts were consumed with Grayson, the way he'd touched me, the promises, implicit in his gaze, the dangerous path we'd started down together. At the airport, as we waited for our flight, Mark's phone rang. "It's Grayson," he said excitedly, answering immediately. I watched my husband's face transform as he listened, his excitement growing with each passing second. "Yes, absolutely, we can make that work. Thank you, Grayson. This is incredible news." Hung up, practically vibrating with joy. "He's in," Mark said, grabbing my hands. "Full investment, everything we asked for and more. We did it, Ava. We actually did it." He kissed me hard, right there in the crowded terminal, and I tasted triumph on his lips. Triumph built on a foundation of my betrayal. "That's wonderful," I managed, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my chest. "You deserve this success." And he did deserve it. Mark was a good man, a devoted husband and father, and his dream was finally coming true. The fact that it was built on my infidelity made the victory bittersweet, tainted with guilt and deception. As our plane lifted off from Vegas, I stared down at the city where my life had irrevocably changed. Somewhere below, Grayson was probably already on his way to his next business meeting, his next conquest. But the memory of his touch lingered on my skin, the echo of his words still resonating in my heart. This wasn't over, couldn't be over. Not when I'd finally found someone who saw me as more than just a supporting character in someone else's story. The flight home was torture. Mark spent most of it on his laptop, already diving into the work that Grayson's investment would make possible, while I sat beside him drowning in guilt and desire. How could I go back to my normal life now? How could I pretend that nothing had changed when everything felt different? The woman who had boarded the plane to Vegas was gone, replaced by someone who knew what it felt like to be truly desired, truly cherished. My phone buzzed with a text, and my heart leaped when I saw Grayson's name. Business is just business. What we shared was personal. Don't let guilt overshadow something beautiful. I stared at the message, torn between deleting it and treasuring it. This was the choice I faced: return to my safe, predictable life, or pursue something dangerous and potentially destructive but undeniably alive. I thought about Mark, about our children waiting at home, about the comfortable routine we'd built. together. Then I thought about Grayson's hands on my skin, his voice whispering that I deserved to be worshipped, the way he'd made me feel like the most important person in his world. The plane touched down, and real life rushed back to meet us. But as I walked through the terminal beside my oblivious husband, I knew that something fundamental had shifted. I'd tasted freedom, experienced passion, remembered what it felt like to be truly alive. The question now was whether I had the courage to pursue it or the strength to walk away. So tell me, if you were in my position, caught between duty and desire, between the safe choice and the dangerous one, what would you do? Would you risk everything for a chance at real passion, or would you stay faithful to the life you'd built? I'm genuinely curious about your thoughts because honestly, I'm still figuring it out myself. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story left you wanting more, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications because trust me, this is just the beginning. Things are about to get a whole lot more complicated.